you can't be like, oh yeah, dude, like it's because you're not taking a position on being vegan or meat eater, you're literally raping children. Like, fuck off.
Oh, this is my work this morning. I can't believe you doubted me.
You did all that in one day?
Well, in a couple hours. I said I woke up. I had to hammer this out, yeah.
Holy shit.
This is our debate work, dude.
What are you going to do with that?
What do you mean? Well, you take it and I use it in my next conversation with the person that I had a conversation with last and see if there are holes or flaws.
Did you meet like a person who was like your equal in debating or something?
Kind of. I mean, that's kind of a weird way to put it, but it's basically, there's a girl in my community that follows a lot of my debate stuff and has a lot of really good input and has positions on veganism ironed out more solidly than I do. So the last time I talked to her, there were some flaws in my position that were exposed to me, so I figure I go back to the drawing board, iron it out a little bit more, and then introduce them again, and then see if she can spot more flaws or if my position is more solid.
And how are you doing this? Are you doing this on the basis of some kind of like foundation, or are you just sort of collecting your thoughts and figuring out how to do it?
Well, yeah, so like, because I'm a layman in philosophy, most philosophy debates are going to be, I have a position, somebody disagrees with that position. If they're intelligent, then what they do is they take my, what you do is you take my arguments and then you apply them to other things to see if I remain consistent. And then if an inconsistency is found, then that means that you have something deeper that you need to resolve. Does that make sense, or is that a little too abstract?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
But can you like elaborate on the second part?
So veganism is a really tough argument to win from
the person arguing for it?
For the person arguing meat eating.
Why?
It's very hard to have, because in order for you to be okay eating meat, you have to, and to have strong ethical positions, you have to have some very solid ethical foundation that allows you to exclude all animals, but include all humans. Generally, that's what most of us want, and it's very, very hard to do that. Like you can try to do a few examples, and I could show you, I guess, if you can think of, like if you want to do like a sample conversation, like why do you think eating meat is okay? Or why do you think killing animals for pleasure is okay?
So, you have to make, your original argument was, I think that animals were essentially less intelligent.
No, I would never make that argument.
Or, that you didn't care as long as they didn't have social pretenses?
Well, basically, so my system is basically built off of reciprocated values. It's like if you're able to reciprocate a value with me, then I'm able to reciprocate a value with you. But that kind of doesn't work in some edge cases, which is what my system was broken down on yesterday. Yeah, so I had to go back and really think about that reciprocated value thing. So that's what I spent most of this morning doing, was like, well, why do I care about reciprocated values? Are these like important in and of themselves, or are they a means to an end? And that kind of stuff, yeah.
I see.
So for me, like, I don't actually care about reciprocated values. I only care about myself. I just use reciprocated values as a way to maximize well-being for myself, right? So, like, I care the most about me being happy, but generally the way that I'm the happiest is when other people around me are happy. So, like, that is kind of where that comes from.
Is that actually right?
I believe so, yeah.
You think that the happiest you are is if other people around you are happy?
Generally, yeah. I wouldn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of people that suck shit, are miserable, are trying to kill me, are otherwise unhappy, right?
Well, we were talking earlier about how you don't put any value on like other people's sort of approval of you based on as compared to your own enjoyment of your own world.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that correlate?
Because when I talk about other people around me being happy, I'm not talking about whether or not they approve of me or not, or whether or not they affirm me or something. It's more just that they are successful in life. That the more people that you surround yourself with that are successful, the better off your life will tend to be. The more successful people you have in your country, the better off your entire country will tend to be. So, like, these are why I think that's important. Whether or not you like these people or hate them, or whether or not they like you or hate you, or approve of you or disapprove of you, the better your population is, the better everybody in that population is, right?
Are you saying that you would hang out with someone who's successful that you don't like just because of that virtue?
Not necessarily. I'm looking at this more from like a general, like, giant class point of view, not like who do I personally choose to hang out with point of view.
But this is about your personal happiness.
Well, no, it's about my system of ethics.
You said that you believe the happiest you can be is to be around other people who are...
Okay, here, let me back up. So, the thing that I'm concerned about with where all of my morals and everything come from, right? For me, is that I want to maximize my well-being or maximize the utility available to me or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I have to find ways, like I have to think about ways to do that. So like how do I maximize my personal well-being? And I guess this is part of what this is about, right? So like I could take it from other people, like right, via force.
Yeah.
So killing people and stealing their shit. You could manipulate or deceive other people by lying and stealing that way. Or you could try to get other people interested in you and do like a common interest sort of thing, which is like the reciprocated value thing, right? Yeah. Doing things by force doesn't seem to be consistent nor realistic. I don't think I'm ever going to be in a position of power where I'll have the necessary resources to force tons of people to make my life better. I don't think.
Isn't that essentially what you do on your stream?
No. People come to my stream by choice. Also, it doesn't seem to be a reliable way to maintain power because dictators on that shit get fucked over time and all that. Manipulating and deceiving people seems to be really difficult and convoluted, and I don't know if you could maintain that over any long period of time. So getting other people interested in you or invested in you seems to be the best way to do it. I think that any moral system that can succeed will have a higher likelihood of succeeding if more people adopt said moral system, right? The more people that share your moral system, the more likely it is that that system will succeed. And I think that for my moral system, I think it's easy to get people interested or invested in it because it keeps other people invested in you. So yeah, so like that. So basically then the question is like, so these are for like questions of policy. If somebody says like, can we tax rich people to help education, you know? Well, the question is if I can trade off a little bit of my money or a greater sum of my money to make it so that more people in my country are more educated, that's probably going to make the entire country better off. So businesses will do better because we've got a more educated population. There'll be less crime, less social ills, right? Like people getting locked up, people killing each other, right? Stuff like that, yeah.
And you had to do all this to determine your position in veganism?
Well, because like a very high level question, very applied question is that, like what I asked you earlier, what makes it okay for you to kill animals but not people?
And what was your how did you reform that answer?
Well, I have a borderline sociopathic approach to all of my morals and ethics because I'm only self-interested. But most people don't share my position. I think that most people should be vegan because I think that most people empathetically or intuitively would tend towards veganism if they thought it out.
Really?
Yeah, because like we can do it. Like, give me an example. Like, why do you think it would be okay to kill an animal but not a person? Like, what's your rationale for that?
I don't know that it is. I haven't really thought through this argument.
Okay, sure. If you start thinking about it, it's a really difficult rabbit hole to run down.
I can't really say that I think that humans are more important than animals.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really say that the classic. So I look at this from like what I look at like a lot of things from like a myth or sort of like what our culture is based off of standpoint, right? So the religious argument, like the Christian argument, would be, well, God created animals to be. This is the only solid argument I can mount, is like, I don't personally believe it, but like, let's say God created animals in order to be subservient to human beings, and so that, and told people that you could use them as you will. That gives you sort of a higher authority to sort of like make it okay, but I think on like a purely moral or ethical basis, it's very hard to justify.
Sure, from the God one is 100% foolproof. Yeah. Like God, whatever God tells you is right because
that's like thinking through the argument, that's the only one I can actually like maybe say I would be able to mount if I like was like seriously trying to defeat this.
Sure.
But like because I don't personally believe that, I have like a very low level opinion on this, right? Which is like I eat meat because it's good and because I'm willing to make the trade off of animal lives, right?
Yeah.
So that's that's just
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging that the cost to the world or whatever is probably greater.
Sure.
And maybe like. You know, the hundreds and hundreds of chickens that I've eaten, or in particular, I eat almost 2 meals a day. Mm-hmm. So I usually have like chicken or beef, fish or chicken, things like that, in addition to like vegetables and stuff. So I would say I eat more meat than the average person, but I admit I can't justify it.
Okay.
But that's kind of an unacceptable position, or what?
It's totally unacceptable, yeah.
Why?
Because unless you're a bigot, you need to have some way to justify why your inconsistency is acceptable, but another person's inconsistency isn't. So
no, because I'm not judging any meat eaters or myself.
But you would judge other people that would violate their moral principles or be inconsistent.
How so?
So let's say a guy comes into your house and he walks in and he steals your computer, and you look at that guy and you say, "Hey, you can't just steal my shit." And the guy goes, I know I probably shouldn't steal it, but the amount of personal satisfaction that I'm going to get from stealing your thing is actually like really high to me, and I just don't really want to think about why I shouldn't. So I'm just kind of being inconsistent here.
That's different. This is I would be judging that person on a totally different moral problem.
Yeah, but both of you have inconsistencies in your moral code, but you've decided that his inconsistency is unacceptable, but yours is acceptable.
I don't think. Well, yeah, in that regard, but because the act of stealing something, or is like a totally different moral basis, and also an
Than
offense.
killing something?
I'm not.
Arguably, one is worse, depending on, and it's not the stealing.
I'm not killing something.
You're kind of directly contributing to the death of something, though.
Not really, dude.
You kind of are.
Not.
If you go to a store and you buy a
microcosm.
chicken, you're eating something that otherwise wouldn't have been killed if you wouldn't
It
have.
would have been killed because market demand and supply on a very, very low level. But macrocosmically, like I'm.
Well,
not
but you're part of that demand.
very tiny.
But you still are.
insignificant. Like,
So like here, okay, well here, actually,
it's a
okay.
different decision.
Sure. So let me. This is how we do. This is how I do a moral argument. Okay. So I'm going to take what you just said and I'll apply that to another thing, and I'll see if you feel the same way. Okay. Let's say that, and I use hyperbolic examples because it illustrates the absurdity of the argument. So let's say that you've got a friend, and your friend goes out for the night, and then he comes back, and you're like, "Hey, did you have fun?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "Well, what did you do?" It's like, "Well, I went out and I raped a kid." And you're like, "That's really fucked up." And the guy's like, "Okay, well, what there is there's this giant building downtown, and they bring in like 1,000 kids every month or whatever, and we all get to go and like pick one kid to rape." And would you tell that friend like, "Okay, that's really fucked up"? And the guy's like, "Well, I mean, like they're bringing in 1,000 kids anyway. You know, I'm just one out of 1,000 people there. They do these in a lot of different cities. Like, I don't think it's necessarily that big of a deal if I'm just doing it a little bit. Like, it's the kid, somebody else probably would have raped him or whatever, right?"
You always do this. You have like an insane fucking argument for like something that is completely societally totally unacceptable. Versus something that is like that. That is not at all the situation we're in, right?
Okay, so this
like,
is basically what I've done is I'm just
kids.
so what I'm doing is I'm extracting your template. Your template was this thing might be a moral wrong, but I'm only a really small part of it. Therefore, I ought to be allowed to do it. Right? That's the template that I got from your initial argument.
In this context.
Well, but so a template is regardless of context.
No, you're making the template. I'm saying so. First of all, the position I was in originally was I can't defend this, right?
Yeah.
But you say that position is unacceptable.
Yeah.
But like if I admit that I can't defend something unless I use a faith-based argument, and then I do it anyway, I don't see how I'm being very different from any other human being that does the same thing.
You're not necessarily. There's tons of people
that
are hypocrites. Yeah.
Yeah, except that I'm conscious of that hypocrisy. So
yeah, sure.
So then from beyond that, if I'm being forced to defend it, you can't like use these like wild analogies where it's like.
Well, no, because I'm not going to let you mount a successful defense just because you feel the need to defend it.
No, what I'm saying is like you can't be like, oh yeah, dude, like it's because you're not taking a position on being vegan or meat eater, you're literally raping children. Like fuck off.
Well, you're not literally raping children. It's a comparison.
It's a context.
It's arguably a lesser scale, depending on how you look at it.
Absolutely a lesser
because
scale.
on one, you're just raping somebody. On the other, you're actually murdering something.
No, I'm not murdering anyone, and I'm not directly doing it.
Okay, but the guy that goes out to rape the kid isn't directly capturing the kids.
He's directly raping him.
You're directly eating an animal. You're just not involved in like the rounding up and the capturing and the.
It's a different matter to benefit from consumerism than it is to actually be a part of the process. I don't work for a slaughterhouse.
But you're part of the demand for slaughterhouses by eating meat. You said it yourself that you eat tons of meat.
In a microcosm.
Yeah, in a small way, but you still are.
But again, okay, take it this way, right? Let's take this example. Let's say that I eating chicken was the difference between chickens being slaughtered and not being slaughtered. I was the sole arbiter. Well,
you're the difference between at least a few getting slaughtered or not slaughtered.
But say I'm the sole arbiter of it, okay? And all chickens getting slaughtered. I would probably not eat chickens at that point, okay? But the scale is such that my contribution or lack of contribution to that effort, it doesn't matter. The entire and I like chicken enough that I'm gonna just eat it because I can't do enough of an impact. I can't make enough of a dent in that economic engine, right? To really influence this. So so you can't just take a template, or you can, but it's a super dick move to do, and blow it up to this fucking like level when that's not the reality of this is our whole fucking difference, Destiny. The whole fucking thing is you live in this world of like fucking like the Hangover style like equations and shit that's happening, but the real fucking world isn't like that, dude.
I acknowledge it.
Is like it doesn't matter if I eat chicken.
I totally
God isn't
listen.
gonna,
No, okay, listen, chill, okay? Take a deep breath, okay? I acknowledge, even I am not like 100% perfectly fucking consistent. I don't wake up every day and robot out like the most consistent moral way to live my life, right? I acknowledge that there's a difference between like the 100% theoretical arguments versus the pragmatic reality we live in, right?
I understand you acknowledge it, but you don't utilize it in any of your actual...
Because when I'm having an argument, we're always pushing for the ideal. That's what I'm pushing for. Like, what is the ideal position, right? And then
but that's not... You should be pushing for the most practical application of that in life.
Okay,
that's what's
so sure,
for us.
but the relevant thing is that the problem is that when we have inconsistencies in our morals, that inconsistency is going to be borne out in an incredibly negative way in some other thing that we don't realize. That's the problem with inconsistencies. So like
yes, but you can't possibly hope to solve that by reaching these like draconian definitions of objective reality.
No. We're not talking about objective reality. I'm just talking about having a consistent moral platform. That if your moral platform is inconsistent, it leads to these other types of externalities that cause everybody harm.
But I'm saying that the virtue, okay, the virtue of a consistent moral platform, that virtue, that ideal, cannot be attained.
But you can get a lot closer to it.
To what end? What
do you mean to get closer and closer?
But if you get closer to that ideal, you're essentially getting further and further away from practical application of that ideal.
Well, no, because practical application changes over time as you push towards an ideal.
Practical application is a separate matter entirely.
But it changes over time as you push towards the ideal.
You would hope that it does.
It does. Well, so far in society, unless you're like a postmodernist, I would argue that it does. That for instance, things like black people living with white people, right? Where it's not sure as fuck isn't perfect now, but it's a lot better than when we had slavery or when they weren't allowed to vote. So even though like people could have made this argument like, okay, say we make black people not slaves. All of them are poor. All of them are fucking dumb. They're not educated. What's the point? It's just going to be a disaster. Like, why don't we could argue to keep the status quo. You would argue, okay, well, no, black people aren't going to be the same as white people overnight, but over time, as society integrates and people figure things out, like we'll approach like a better, same thing with gay marriage, same thing with any other issue like that.
Well, okay, yeah, but those are kind of like complex social issues of inequality, which is again different from like the animal example, where I don't see how
animal eating is a really complicated thing too.
I don't see how reaching a consistent moral platform on this animal issue is gonna like solve the like or necessarily drive us to a more practical application of the fact.
Well, on this particular issue, it might not. But
this particular issue is what we were discussing. I don't want to go into raping kids. I don't want to go into the
No, and I said on this particular issue, it's fine. I'm just saying that if at the end of the issue, your statement is, I have an unjustified belief, and, it's just, that's that, then what you've kind of said is that at the end of that argument, we have to carry forward that to every other area of our life. We can't just isolate things. You're basically saying, or you're working under this presupposition that I can have an unjustified belief, and that's not a big deal.
Yes, I do think that's okay in a place where the scale of your individual impact on it is such that it is not relevant, such as this animal thing. Okay?
Which is a little different, and I can see that argument.
Whereas if there is a strong impact I can make, such as on a social issue like do you kill people or not, right? That is something I should certainly have a very strong moral position on either way, because that is going to impact humanity in a very positive or negative way, depending on how I dictate it, right?
Sure.
So I think for me to capitulate on an issue where we've acknowledged that I have less of an ability to impact it by scale is more appropriate than if I take that position hypocritically with other issues. Like
would you say that like you would vote for like senators and stuff that were saying that we need to make meat eating illegal and we should move towards veganism?
I would say that I'm not informed enough to make that decision, so I would stay out of it.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying is that this debate is not something I'm capable of taking to the field on.
Oh, sure,
I
okay.
would want to maximize my impact on things that I did understand.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty appropriate position to be in.
It can be, yeah, depending on where you apply that to.
Well, because while you're technically morally hypocritical, you're doing so with a sort of conscious acknowledgement that you can focus on things that you have greater impact in.
Kind of, yeah. You just have to be careful because that can lead you to some scary places. People would make same arguments about climate change.
You can, but again, you have to be introspective enough to isolate those individual situations based on impact.
Sure. I guess like for what I do, I like to be able to argue with some degree of moral authority. So when I say that, what I mean is like I have a consistent, or as consistent as it can be, a platform from which to argue why you ought do something or ought not do something. So if I'm going to argue about like a social issue, like should we have socialized healthcare, right? I can build my argument from ground zero from I only care about myself, that's like my basic like axiomatic belief, I can build socialized healthcare up all the way from that. And I can do that with all morals that I have. But if I argue with somebody that hasn't thought through any of their positions and they've got like really strong but unjustified beliefs on that, it makes it hard for me to engage that person in a conversation, and they're never going to convince me of anything, right? And then if I were to attack somebody with an unjustified moral position, then there's no reason they should listen to me, right?
Yeah, but again, that would only be pertinent to the realm of that isolated issue, right? So said another way. Let's say that I have 4 or 5 very strong moral positions that I can engage you on, and animals are not one of them.
Yeah, sure.
So we just leave that out, and then we move to the other 4 and 5 that we have strong positions on.
Sure.
And I mean, and like, I'm perfectly okay with you disregarding my entire knowledge, whatever you would call it, knowledge base of animal stuff, because I've said that myself. I've introspectively identified that I cannot be informed of this issue, or I'm not informed enough to take a position.
That's it. Just to be clear,
Yeah.
these are 2 very different positions. The idea that I haven't spent the time needed to be introspective on this position, or I don't have this position thought out enough to have a strong opinion on it,
That's my position.
that's different than I totally acknowledge that I'm being a huge hypocrite here and I'm just inconsistent. Those are 2 really different positions.
Well, it's not in this case, because on one hand, it is a matter of me being uninformed, but on the other hand, I'm eating meat every day. So I'm obviously taking the hypocritical route, right?
Well, not necessarily.
No?
No. So, like, for instance, like, sweatshops might be immoral and unethical, but you buy clothes, or coffee beans might be farmed from bad people, but you go to Starbucks, or drugs might be bad, but you still smoke weed. Like, I think that I would argue that there is some level of removal that you're not like there are degrees of immorality, I would argue. So, like, for instance, like, let's say that you even acknowledge that sweatshops, let's say that you think that sweatshops are moral wrong, that if you buy clothes because it's all that's like available that fits and looks nice and you buy it, that there's still a difference between that and the person who like literally like ties up and enslaves a kid to like make clothes or whatever for slave labor or some shit. That these are 2 different levels of like moral wrongness. That makes sense?
It does, but then is my position okay then?
I mean, I would argue no, because it's something that you actively take part in, that you should figure out whether or not it's actually okay. And I think that because you're kind of hiding, like, I'm scared to think about this, because if I come to a moral answer I don't want, then I have to acknowledge that I'm being a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And like I said, as soon as you acknowledge that you're being a hypocrite, I think you lose all ability to attack other people's moral positions.
On that issue?
On almost any issue.
No, on that issue. I don't lose any credibility and attack, like, believe me, if we do another spar on something that, I mean, I can mount that just as easily if I'm firm on it. I have my foundations right. But on the animal thing, yeah, I can't, and that's fine. But,
I guess like anything that was like even like borderline sort of related, I would just be really uncomfortable.
Was like what?
Like let's say that I had to go. Okay, so my kid has ADHD. Let's say that I need to go talk to his physician about what the best ADHD medication is, right? Let's say that I find out in the course of our conversation that he was an anti-vaxxer, that he wasn't for vaccinations. I have no clue what his argument is going to be for like healthcare related stuff for my kid, but I have no interest in what he has to say, because he's like.
So if a person says that they're not informed enough and doesn't want to, and they don't want to pursue get information on this subject because they like what they're doing, which is more of a hedonistic quality, I think, than anything, that disqualifies them from having a moral or ethical standpoint on other issues?
Well, the thing is that it makes it like really hard to take anything they say seriously, because like how do they weigh their issues? So for instance,
it just means they didn't weigh that issue. It doesn't mean that they didn't think through a whole host of other things. Like I'm an anecdotal example of this, where like that issue I really don't feel like I'm informed on. I'll just say, hey, I don't understand. But then like if you take up an issue like personal development or like should your kid be in martial arts or things like that, I have like really strong foundations. Like I got an example that doesn't involve raping kids. Okay, ready? Great, okay.
Let's say there's a guy and he drives like buzz driving.
Buzz driving.
Yeah. Like you get like buzz, you're tipsy.
Drunk?
Yeah, a little bit. Not super drunk, but just like kind of drunk, right?
Okay.
So if you had to blow, you would be over the legal limit, but like you're not super drunk, right? Let's say that a guy does this all the time, okay? And you engage this person in an argument, and you're like, hey, you need to stop doing this. You shouldn't do this. And the guy's like, well, I'm a vegan. You kill like millions of fucking animals, you know? I'll just take this risk here. I don't see how you can tell me that I can't do that if you're still a meat eater or whatever. Like, how do you balance out? How do you say, like, okay, well, I might ignore this moral principle here, but you should, you're compelled to follow this moral principle here. Like, how do you weigh that?
Again, you can't find me a single practical application. You can't find me a single human, I think. You might be the closest one I know.
Thanks.
That has a firm moral position on everything. So literally what you're telling me is you're just discounting everything.
Well, or how about not a firm moral position on everything, but on most things that they, like, heavily participate in?
I really don't think so. You really think that most human beings have a heavy moral position?
No, I don't think so. I think they should, but...
Yeah. Of course they should.
Sure.
I don't think we disagree on that. But the number of people that are going to go through that, you need another model for the world is what I'm saying. Because that's
I've got models for the world. Oh, I understand that. I totally understand that. Don't misunderstand me. I don't think that most people are walking philosophy geniuses that are ready to debate pull out their dictionaries on the streets and, like, go into, like, hardcore debate mode. Like, I understand that.
Yeah, like, if I put down my fork and my steak and they're like, and I'm like, well, here's my entire position on this and, like, I'll mount this offensive. Like, okay, great if I can do that, but, like, that's not how everybody actually lives. And again, these are things that you have to account for in your discussions to other people because everyone views the world in this way.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So are you just...
I push for moral consistency because I think the closer you... It's like the gym argument I gave you. Do you remember that?
The what?
The gym thing that I gave you, right?
Well, remind me. What's the...
Nobody that works out is ever going to be the perfect physical self, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you would never argue that you shouldn't work out because you're never going to be the best. Because the approach to it is always going to be a better you, even if you're never perfect, right? So I advocate for people to have consistent moral principles because the closer you get to that, the better other things in your life become. We can make better decisions about things if we stem from like the same place.
I agree with that in a lot of cases, but like it seems to me that the fear of like in my example, right, where I'm not approaching this issue because I really like meat and I don't want to get to a moral position where I'm forced to stop eating it, right? That would definitely not increase my personal happiness to lose that virtue.
Well, but that's if you're, but not everybody, it's very rare that a person's thing is personal happiness.
What? Most
people are very empathetic.
Gregarious?
Empathetic by virtue. If you see something suffering, like for instance, I would argue that 95+%, at least of Westerners, if they were walking down the street and they saw that a dog was like hungry or limping in the middle of the road, they would go out and try to help the dog. Not because like they would go out of their way to do it because like they have like a vested interest in like the well-being of other creatures. That most people, like I think the most common axiomatic like basis for philosophical systems is to reduce the suffering of all sentient life. That everything that can experience pain, you want to reduce the experience of that pain for most people.
I mean, I think human beings are mostly hedonists fundamentally until...
No way, we're totally social creatures.
We're naturally gregarious creatures, but only if it's to our... only if it doesn't cost a great deal to ourselves to get away with it, usually. Unless there's some overarching belief or faith or religion or things.
I don't know, man. Like, parents will sacrifice for their children almost, like, defaulto, I think, like humans will.
But at that same parent will put their kid in front of the TV and raise them on it and not spend any personal time with them.
Yeah, but that's kind of different.
It's the same.
No.
No, you invest in your kid as long as it's convenient for you.
No, I'm just talking about, like, our baser social instincts, right?
Those are, of course, gregarious.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
Again, like, how it practices out is not...
Well, sure, yeah. In more complicated social situations, we kind of get away from that, right?
I would say. So I do agree that like fundamentally human beings are like group-based, empathetic, gregarious creatures.
Yeah, for sure.
We have to be because if we weren't, the tribes wouldn't have.
Probably, yeah. The lack of cooperation will fuck you, yeah.
Yeah, we literally wouldn't have come to this point.
Probably,
if
yeah.
That was the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I think human beings are only that to the extent that they can get away with it, or it doesn't cost them too much. And again, that's the
possibly, yeah, sure.
The exceptions to this are like patriotism. You have soldiers that'll die for their country, stuff like that. That's obviously the there's some kind of group think that allows individuals to put themselves aside in those situations that I don't completely understand.
Sure.
I don't know, man. I think I have a whole meme about the whole reality argument.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but we're not getting into that right now because we have daylight, and daylight in Tahoe is beneficial.